Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Big Bid Theory. This is Bill Culhane, host of the show from our palatial studios here in Austin, Texas. Appreciate you carving some time out, and we've got a really good show coming up. I know what you're thinking. We always have good shows, but in particular, in this episode, we've got some really interesting stuff. A couple of experts are going to join us here momentarily. First, we're going to visit with Mr. Marty Rogers, who is the director of Asure over at Mississippi State over in Starkville. Some people refer to it as Stark Vegas. Some of you may know, and we'll let Marty explain in a moment more about Asure. Marty's going to talk about drones and going to touch on unmanned aerial systems, an absolute exploding industry. The advancements in technology, the increase in use, really it's across society. Obviously the military comes to mind, but the commercial applications also, of course, there's the recreation component as well. Marty is an absolute learned individual when it comes to drones and UAS and all those things. So we're going to have a conversation with him. And then Jim is going to join us. Of course, the Jim Ward is going to come by. And Jim, as most of you probably know, Jim is a man of many talents. He's a man of many interests. Well, he also does, he hosts Man vs. Yoga, a podcast dedicated to, guess what? Yoga. And Jim came across an applicable, a relevant, crazy bid. So that's coming up a little bit later in the show. Anyway, when I was in the Air Force stationed over in the United Kingdom, at our base there, I was stationed about an hour and a half north of London. Anyway, at the Royal Air Force Base where I served, we had F-4s, we had TR-1s, both of those aircraft involved in reconnaissance, right? It's about intelligence, about finding information. And obviously, still today, drones are used by the military for reconnaissance and the like. Well, I can remember, and I had come across drones during my time in the military, but I can remember I would drive around the greater Austin area, and from time to time, it didn't happen often, but from time to time, I would see individuals out there with drones. And so that's kind of really, for me, that's when I became very interested in drones. And working here at BidPrime, I've seen the immense growth in terms of government agencies requesting a variety of drone-related technology, services, solutions, really the gambit. And so that's been interesting to see. My son, he had a parrot. He had a parrot for a while before that thing found the ground. Before he crashed his parrot, and it is no more. But as I mentioned a moment ago, Marty's going to go over Asure's responsibilities. He is far more qualified at that than I am. Like me, Marty is a U.S. Air Force veteran. As a matter of fact, he and I each, not together, he and I each had an opportunity to serve over in Europe. Back in 2013, Marty led the Alaska Center for Unmanned Aircraft Systems Integration at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And then Mr. Rogers, Marty, headed to Starkville back in June of 2016 to join the Asure Program. And here's my sit down with Marty.
Thanks again for joining us, Marty. And I just gave your background a little bit in an introduction to this segment. And from one U.S. Air Force veteran to another, we do appreciate your service.
Well, thank you, and you too.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty here, Marty. Because the development and deployment of unmanned aerial systems is relatively new in the timeline of mankind, even though you and I, of course, know that the military has been using the technology for quite some time. But what we've noticed here recently is the commercial and recreational purposes. It's kind of exploded in recent times. And so on that note, there are still a myriad of issues being addressed within the industry. We see state, local, and federal governments weighing in. Please briefly describe Asure's role in helping to promote, manage, and grow the industry.
Bill, thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about our program. So the Assure program, Assure stands for the Alliance for System Safety of UAS through Research Excellence. Since May of 2015, so May of this year, we're exactly 3 years old, come the end of this month. We're a 5-year program with one 5-year option. So the theory being that we'll be a 10-year program funded on a one-to-one cost match basis by the Federal Aviation Administration. That means that for every dollar that we receive from the FAA to do the research that they ask us to do, we find another dollar somewhere else. Typically, that's from one of our research partners, and a lot of those are industry or other academic institutions. The Assure program is led by Mississippi State University, based out of Starkville, Mississippi, and we have then 14 other core university partners, including the University of Alabama, University of Alaska, Fairbanks, Embry-Riddle, University of California, Davis, Kansas State, University of Kansas, Wichita State, Montana State, New Mexico State, North Carolina State, University of North Dakota, Oregon State, Ohio State, and then directly, I probably named some of your listeners' alma maters, by the way, hopefully.
Sure.
And then we have an affiliate team. These are not core universities. In other words, they are part of our program. They support our research through their capabilities internally, their labs, their staff, but they don't have a direct relationship with the FAA from a financial perspective. So the funding that they receive is typically as a subcontractor to one of the cores. And our affiliate team is Auburn and Tuskegee in Alabama, Indiana State, Technion in Israel, Louisiana Tech, Sinclair Community College, Concordia in Canada, and then the University of Southampton in the United Kingdom. So you can see this is a big, broad, diverse team, and that's actually why we were selected by the FAA over some other teams that were really trying to do more in-house and not quite as diverse as we were. One of the other strengths of the team is that we also include, I don't know if you've heard of the UAS test site program. So there are 7 formally designated unmanned aircraft test sites in the United States. And of those 7 designated test sites, 3 of those are part of our program, and that being the University of Alaska Fairbanks, New Mexico State University, and the University of North Dakota. And so we have within our program not just the core capabilities of the universities, but also then their extended capabilities through the test site and then their partners as well. So it's a big team.
How exactly does Assure supplement what the FAA is trying to do in terms of the unmanned aerial system industry?
The research that we do all has a common theme in that it is based on the eventual safe integration of unmanned aircraft into the national airspace. And so I fly a lot. In addition to being a pilot, I'm also a passenger a lot. I think a lot of your listeners are on airplanes on a regular basis, like weekly basis or monthly basis. And so we all want it to be a safe environment. When we take off, when we land, and when we're en route, we want it to be safe, and we don't want to be mixing up in the airspace, as it were, with uncontrolled unmanned aircraft, or in the majority of the world, it's referred to as RPAS, remotely piloted aircraft systems. We refer to them as unmanned aircraft. So everything that Assure does, all of our research really is geared toward that safe integration into the national airspace and eventual almost mixing of manned and unmanned aviation. Now that we're some ways from that. We're a long way from that. But so we're not really in baby steps. There's a lot happening right now. But everything we do works toward that safe integration.
In preparation for our visit, Marty, I looked at, obviously, Assure's website, and I couldn't help but glance at the vision statement, and included in that is the word safety, or safely, I guess, more specifically, and I couldn't help but fixate on that word. So we know, as you just pointed out, that the airspace is a busy place. It's right. Busier than many, I think, people realize. So what are a few of those safety considerations as it pertains to drones and other unmanned vehicles that are up above our heads?
The Assure piece of this really is looking at that eventual, as I say, that full integration. So, but we've done a lot of work that's in the preliminary stages to that. We've done human factors work as a good example of what a good ground control station design should be. And that's been a fantastic project, because if you have operators, in many cases, unlike manned aviation, a lot of the unmanned aviation, you have systems that can stay airborne for 24 hours plus. And they're great for persistent surveillance of an oil spill or a wildfire or a search and rescue event. You can park an aircraft up there, but it has a human operating it at some location. So really, what are some of those human factors issues related to good, solid ground control station design? Right, because as you get time goes by, as you get tired, you really do need an intuitive system to be able to operate. So human factors have been a part of it. Secure command and control links. So as an example, much of what we do, again, it's remote. If it's beyond visual line of sight, you may be operating through satellite control. So what are some of the issues related to the command and control systems using satellite links? And here's an interesting nuance on that. You're now handing over potentially command and control of the system, or at least that linkage, to a third party. In a line of sight operation, you have in the case of, say, a quadcopter, you may have at home, Bill, you may have a little handheld, joystick device where you can actually fly the quadcopter around in your yard or over your farm or whatever and just take some pictures, and it's a hobby, right? Well, that's a direct link between you and that unmanned aircraft. When you start getting into beyond that sort of direct electronic line of sight, which can go out 60, 70, 80 nautical miles or even further. We've taken systems over 80 nautical miles using directional antennas, so you're still pointed directly at that aircraft even though it's 80 nautical miles away. But there's no one in between you and that aircraft. There's no third party. But once you enter the world of using a satellite control, you're now entering into a third party. And so we're taking a look at those command and control systems as it relates to satellite link, uplink, downlink, and that third party being in the middle of it. Because, again, you need safe control of that aircraft at all times, at all phases of flight.
A moment ago, I heard you mention, and everybody listening to the podcast understands the military applications. We've all seen it in the news, and of course, you and I were in the Air Force, so we know how the military is going about using this technology. I heard you mention various uses for aerial observation, for reconnaissance. As I mentioned on the intro to the show, I can remember years ago, I would drive by a city park, and occasionally, it was rare, but occasionally I would see a person standing out there flying a drone as a hobby, and kids would be standing by, and I would think, wow, that's cool. But nowadays, drones are being used for many other reasons. Kind of give us a recap of some of the uses that you see outside of the military.
So I've been in the business now this is my 16th year in the unmanned aircraft business, and almost all of it's civil, even though I'm retired Air Force. I didn't actually do this while I was in the Air Force. It was only after, and I came in it sideways. I came in it through, most people in this business are pilots, they're RC pilots, and it's a real enthusiasm. I came at it sideways. I was actually in ground robotics before I came into unmanned aircraft. And so because I have so many years in it compared to a lot of folks, I've seen it really evolve and change over a fairly long period of time. And if you leap back, you refer to seeing people in parks, and it was kind of a rare event. We can all remember back to sort of the RC clubs where you've got folks out flying two-stroke powered planes on a small field, and it's always to me quite fascinating. And it was also very well internally policed. The safety was and is now still their number one goal. But that was really as a hobbyist. What we're seeing now is the actual use of the systems. And so in the 16 years I've been in it, we've done lots as it relates to wildfire, being able to put an aircraft up and fly it all night for a wildfire when manned aviation either can't fly because of visibility issues or is not operating at night. And so they're doing drops with helicopters during the day. These are big wildfires in some cases, several 100,000 acres, 800 to 1,000 firefighters on scene, and yet they lose, in many cases, really, where is that fire at night? Where is the fire line? Where are the hot spots? And so one of the things you can do with this technology is actually fly it all night long, tracking the hot spots, looking at creeks or roads where the fire might jump and end up in a populated area. And so it's a great use of the technology. Oil spill is another one, being able to put a persistent platform up, tracking ships that are transiting. And again, these are all non-military applications. This is all purely civil applications. But tracking ships that are coming and going and looking for them dumping things overboard, whatever it is. And so monitoring your territorial waters using this technology, again, in a civil application, it's a fantastic way of doing it, especially in the Arctic. The Arctic is a pretty tough environment. And so being able to conduct operations in the Arctic and your operator be hundreds, if not thousands of miles away for extended periods of time really opens up doors from a surveillance perspective, and also marine mammal studies. The list is fairly endless. When I first really started into this, I was challenged on a regular basis by other pilots saying, you're trying to take my job away. You're really trying to take my livelihood away. And I would push back on that, and I would say, well, that's not my experience. My experience is we're doing things that traditional manned aviation simply can't do. These extended operations or flying in visibility that manned aviation simply cannot operate in. I mean, we're doing bridge inspections by flying under a bridge. Manned aviation doesn't do anything like that. So what I've seen is very, very few instances where we've actually replaced manned aviation. We found so many more new opportunities for data collection using unmanned aircraft technology that really manned aviation simply could never execute it in a safe manner.
There are, as you pointed out so very well, Marty, there are a number of commercial applications and certainly more to come. But, speaking of the public sector, I looked in BidPrime's database this morning before I hopped in the studio, and over the past year, there have been literally hundreds of government-related requests for drone and unmanned vehicle technology support services. And you and I spoke about this yesterday ever so briefly, Marty, but in terms of the growth of the industry, this morning I glanced at a report from Expert Consulting, and there are, of course, numerous other interests with similar forecasts, but Expert Consulting projects that the UAV drones market size will grow from $17.8 billion, that was last year, to $48.92 billion by 2023. You're in the trenches. As you mentioned, you have about 16 years of experience in and around this industry. So how would you describe the growth in the industry? Is it exceeded your expectations? Are you hearing numbers different than I just gave out from Expert Consulting? What are you hearing?
Well, I'm not hearing different numbers. What I can say is I get approached by people and saying, hey, is it too late to get in? Is it too late to be a part of this? Is it too late for our company to start look at this being a service that we offer to others, or internal use for us to actually use it for own internal purposes, not necessarily. And what I tell them is, I said, no, the timing is actually fantastic right now because a lot of the early adopters did the heavy lifting. It's very unfortunate, but a lot of companies, thousands of small companies that started up and have now kind of gone away because they couldn't bridge that chasm to make it to the point of revenue generation. That's changing. That's changing on a daily basis now. Part of that is the regulatory environment is changing. It's a little bit slower in the U.S. than it is in some locations. In Canada, it's more progressive currently. It was that way for some time. Then it's sort of flip back to the U.S. Then Canada's become a little bit more progressive now, and so you see more and more beyond visual line of sight operations happening in Canada. Canada's stood up two test sites itself, Alma, Quebec, and Foremost, Alberta. But you see a real focus by both the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration with its Unmanned Aircraft Integration Office, and then on the Transport Canada side, they have established a UAS task force to really accelerate this safe integration into the NAS. If you look at countries like Australia, I've been down 4 times to Australia in the past couple of years, speaking with CASA and their services, specifically on long-range, beyond visual line of sight, at high-altitude operations, and very, very progressive. The default answer when you walk in the door for us was yes, we're going to make this happen for you. The question is how we're going to make that happen, but it's not a question of whether we can make it happen or not. And that's a fantastic situation when you walk in and they say the answer is yes. Now how do we make it happen? What I tell people now is watch the money. For the longest time, money was chasing airplanes because airplanes are sexy. So you've got single rotors and multi-rotors, fixed wings. Now, in the last couple of years, you've seen several companies, Latitude Engineering, Arcturus now, Textron, and just a whole bunch now. PAE is another one that have established design and built systems that are hybrids. They're fixed wings, but actually take off and land vertically. So once once you are at altitude, they transition to forward flight. So you end up with a very low logistics footprint. You don't have a heavy launcher or recovery vehicle that you have to transport around with you. So you have low footprint, efficient operations. It's just smart. The smart money is going in that direction. And smart money is also looking at payloads and sensors, because at the very end of the day, an unmanned aircraft is nothing more than a pickup. Even if it's a quadcopter, it's just something designed to carry a payload. That's all it is. It's really about the match of that payload with the platform, whether it's rotary wing or fixed wing, VTOL, beyond visual line of sight, etc., is the right combination. So more money is getting into payloads because at the end of the day, it's actually all about data, and that's the payload. This is a great time to be in the business. This is a great time to be in this industry, and it's actually just going to get better once the regulatory environment fully catches up with the technology and the desires of industry, of academia, of research, of the institutions around, not just domestically but internationally. It's a great time to be in the business.
Well, Marty, on behalf of our audience, we appreciate so much you sharing this invaluable information, and thanks to all the work that you and the folks at Asure are doing. As I did my research background on Asure, I was really taken by surprise on how far the reach is. As you mentioned, so many institutions are involved in what you're doing, and that's impressive.
Well, thank you. We have a fantastic program. The leadership at Mississippi State has been very generous with not just me, but with our program, and we have great partners in this. I would ask folks if they're interested in what we're doing. The majority of our research results are actually right on our website. They're in the public domain, and it's at Asure. Just on a search and just type in assure.uas, or you can go www.assureuas.org, and under research projects, you can actually read our reports. You can see what we're doing on air-to-ground collision severity, air-to-air collision severity, on engines, on structures, and get a sense of really where we're at in the community. And I'm very grateful for your time.
Absolutely. And by the way, for our listeners, we will, of course, share a link in the description of the podcast for those who want to reference the information that Marty just pointed out. So, Marty, again, thanks so much. And I guess it's appropriate to say go Bulldogs.
Go Bulldogs. That's right. My boss would be pretty unhappy if I didn't say that. So go Dogs. And Bill, thank you so much.
Thanks again to Marty Rogers. And for those of you, I know we have many experts on the technology, on the industry, many of you folks listening, or it's very likely we have listeners as well who have companies that provide technology services, solutions, and support of the technology. We'd like to hear from you, your take. Well, what you project will go on in the industry in the next 3, 5, 10 years. It sure is exciting. So speaking of exciting, it's always exciting to bring in my co-host, Jim Ward, also, by now, also known as the guru of crazy bids. And I pointed out at the intro of the podcast that Jim, a man of many talents, a man of numerous interests. Well, one of those, of course, is yoga. And it just so happens that this crazy bids ties into that very subject. Jim, take it away.
Crazy bits that you can win.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You have found yourself right in the middle of crazy bids that you can win by the Big Bid Theory. My name is Jim Ward, and I am the conductor of Crazy Bids. This episode's Crazy Bid is actually something dear to my heart. It's in New Jersey. Quit snickering. It's in the borough of Seabright. So, against popular opinion, there is something bright in New Jersey. Of course, I'm kidding. It's the Garden State. There's tons of bright things. I just have never seen them. But it is for yoga classes in the borough of Seabright. So, yoga classes, and there's 2 bids. One's for morning, and one's for evening. So first off, usually on this show, as you know, it turns out to be crazy bids that I can win because, I cherry pick them. I do. And I'm better than most of you at them. So But this time, I'm not going to bid. So this is truly a crazy bid that you can win. You being, yeah, exactly. So, yoga in the morning. Anyone that knows me at all knows I am
Not a nice person in the morning.
So that I don't even practice yoga in the morning. I have a few times, and I've regretted it. Right in the middle, you know, how you're in the middle of class, and you're just like, I wish I were home. I wish I were online working, whatever. But the evening classes I could do, but I would have to go to New Jersey. And I made a promise to myself after my last trip. I'm not going to. I mean, it still shocks me that it begat the boss, whose greatness, of course. So, but the good news is, I happen to know 36,712 yoga instructors that are looking for work. And I mean, I'm kidding by a zero. Okay, I only know 3,000. But I know plenty of amazing yoga instructors who could do an amazing job. Now this, I believe, is going to be working with veterans, which is a big deal in the yoga community. Yoga is a way to treat PTSD without pills. Yoga is a way to treat a lot of things without pills, by the way. So, not a bad thing. Not a bad thing, especially with the opioid epidemic, which we had on the previous show, and so forth. So yeah, this bid is wide open, and you know, it doesn't even say you have to be a certified yoga instructor. So I think it would be really funny if somebody that had no yoga experience won it, which would basically be every guy that I know. So this is not sole source for a WOSB or women-owned business, but it will be won by a female because I am the only male that practices yoga. I truly am. So the bid is actually coming due on the summer, on the 19th. And it's fresh off the presses. I saw this off the Bid Prime wire, the ticker.
The mighty machine that makes the entire world revolve around its axis.
And so I snatched it up, and I'm handing it to all of you yoga instructors who, I'm not going to say stalk me, but you guys follow me. You hop around as I do, which is cool. So it's pretty cut and dry. Yoga instructors, get your namaste together. You know, Borough of Seabright, New Jersey is looking for you. And you have my word, I will not beat you. Because normally I know I've gotten emails and some nasty phone calls when I beat you people. But on this one, I promise not to. So that's it. Thank you for listening. Bill and those guys back in the studio are just tearing it up. With that, I'm going to pitch it back to them with a big, wet kiss and thank you. Until next time.
Crazy bits, crazy bits, crazy bits that you can win.
Back to you, Bill.
So thank you very much, Jim. Always good to hear from you. And yet another par excellence of Crazy Bids by not Jim Ward, but the Jim Ward. We want to thank you for downloading, following the Big Bid Theory, sharing the podcast with your friends, peers, family members, the post office person, whoever it is. We sure do appreciate it. You can email me at bcallhane@bidprime.com. Jim is jward@bidprime.com. And of course, as many of you know, I think we're up to nearly 5,000 followers on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at the Big Bid Theory. My Twitter, if you want to tweet me directly, my Twitter is contract_hunter. Jim on Twitter is jward, and then the number 6, so jward6. And also don't forget, we are on Facebook as well. Want to give the folks at Facebook a shout out there. So powered by Bid Prime, on behalf of the entire TBBT staff, all of our folks here, we appreciate again Marty Rogers for coming on to visit with us. And want to remind you, keep your eyes up in the sky. You never know when a drone is flying overhead. Until our next time, go Gunners, Barracudas, Tigers, Bobcats, and Cubs. And we wish you all the best in growing your business.
We're having so much fun.